The night was quiet, yet the whole city seemed to hum with invisible noise, the kind that fills the air when something big is about to happen. The tall glass building at the heart of the city glowed with scattered lights. Most offices were dark, except one on the top floor. Inside, a man sat alone, his eyes fixed on the computer screen, his fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. He had built everything people admired: technology, innovation, even hope for the future. But tonight he wasn't thinking about progress. Tonight he was thinking about truth. For months he had uncovered pieces of something hidden, files buried deep in old servers, coded messages left behind by people who thought no one would ever find them. It wasn't about technology anymore. It was about something bigger, something that could shake the world. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The screen's blue light reflected off his face. He had read those files 100 times. Each time they felt heavier. Lies, cover-ups, secrets, all tied to people the world trusted. He wasn't sure why it hurt so much. Maybe because he had always believed in transparency. Maybe because he wanted people to know the truth no matter how ugly it was. But exposing it meant chaos. It meant enemies. It meant losing everything he had built. He got up and walked toward the window. From up here the streets looked small. Cars moved like fireflies. People walked fast, each carrying their own world of worries and dreams. None of them knew what he knew. None of them knew how fragile their world really was. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts. A message alert. He turned back to the desk. It was from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about the files." His pulse quickened. He had told no one about them. Not a single person. He stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back one word: "Who?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who still believes the truth matters." He closed the laptop slowly. Whoever this person was, they knew something. Maybe too much. Across the city, in a small apartment filled with papers, coffee mugs, and the faint glow of an old lamp, a woman sat at her desk, scrolling through endless documents. She had been a journalist once, and a good one. But years of chasing stories that went nowhere had worn her down. Editors stopped taking her calls. Her stories stopped getting published. Still, she couldn't let go. She had received an anonymous email 2 days ago, a single line that had pulled her back into the fire she thought she'd left behind. "He has the files. He's not safe." She didn't know who he was, but she had a feeling it mattered. The city was quiet outside, but her heart was loud. She had spent years trying to expose lies and corruption, but every time she got close, the door shut in her face. Maybe this was her last chance. Maybe this was the story that could make people listen again. She took a deep breath and sent a message to the same encrypted number that had reached out to the tech billionaire. "Earlier that night, I got your message. Who is he?" The reply came minutes later. "You'll meet him soon. But be careful. They're watching." Her hand shook slightly as she set her phone down. She had heard that warning before. It never ended well. But something about this felt different. Maybe it was the name she saw in the attached file. A name that carried weight, power, and decades of hidden influence. She didn't know if the story would destroy her career or finally redeem it. She only knew one thing: she couldn't stop now. The next morning, the city looked normal again. People rushed to work. Screens flashed with headlines and traffic filled the streets. No one noticed the black car parked near the tech company's gate. Inside sat 2 men in suits, silent, watching. The man inside the building had barely slept. His mind replayed every decision that brought him here. He had built systems to connect people, not to hide secrets. But now those same systems held the proof he couldn't ignore. He knew what the files meant. And he knew that if he revealed them, he'd be at war with people who didn't lose. His assistant knocked on the door gently. "You have a meeting at 9, she said. "Cancel it," he replied without looking up. She hesitated. "Should I tell them why?" He finally looked up, his expression calm but distant. "Just tell them I'm working on something important." After she left, he opened the encrypted folder one last time. The words glared back at him. Messages, records, plans. It wasn't just about politics. It was about trust and how easily it could be traded for power. His phone buzzed again, but another message from the same number. "Meet me tonight. Old Pier, 11 p.m. Come alone." He stared at it for a long time. Maybe this was the trap he'd been waiting for, or maybe it was his only chance to do the right thing. That night, the pier was almost empty. The wind carried the scent of salt and metal. He parked his car at the far end and stepped out, pulling his coat tighter around him. A few streetlights flickered. He saw her before she saw him. A woman standing near the water, her hair moving with the wind, her phone in her hand. "You're the one who messaged me," he said softly. She turned, cautious but calm. "You're the one who has the files." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The sound of the waves filled the silence between them. "I don't know who you are," he said, "but if you know about the files, then you know how dangerous this is." "I know," she said quietly, "but I also know people deserve to know the truth." He studied her face like there was honesty in her eyes, but also fear. She wasn't here for fame or headlines. She was here because she still believed that truth could save something. He sighed. "The truth isn't what people think it is. It's heavier. Once you lift it, you can't put it down again." "Maybe," she said, "but lies weigh more when you carry them too long." He almost smiled. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to him like that. They stood there for a while, watching the dark water. Then he handed her a small drive. "This is just a part of it. Don't open it on any normal device. They'll trace you." She took it carefully, her hand shaking. "Why give it to me?" "Because I can't do this alone anymore," he said. "And maybe you still remember what the truth sounds like." She wanted to ask more, but before she could, headlights appeared at the end of the pier. A black SUV rolled closer, its lights cutting through the fog. He tensed immediately. "They found us," he whispered. "Who?" "People who don't like the truth." He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the far side of the dock. The car door opened and shadows stepped out. They ran, not fast enough to escape the fear building in their chests, but fast enough to stay alive. The woman dropped her phone. It shattered against the ground. They turned a corner and ducked behind a stack of old crates. The man's breathing was rough, his heart pounding. "We can't go back," he said. She looked at him, her voice low but steady. "Then where do we go?" He thought for a moment, then looked toward the old bridge in the distance. "Somewhere they can't find us." "Not yet," she nodded, clutching the small drive tightly in her hand. It felt like it was burning through her skin. As they disappeared into the mist, the SUV's headlights swept across the empty dock. But they were already gone. Somewhere far from the noise and lights of the city, a story had just begun, one that could tear everything apart or finally bring the truth to light. The man looked at the woman beside him as they crossed the bridge. "If you publish this," he said, "they'll come for you." "They already do," she replied softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked ahead into the darkness. He didn't know what waited for them, but for the first time in years, he felt something close to hope. Because sometimes, even when the truth is dangerous, the silence around it is worse. And tonight, the silence had been broken. The rain had started before dawn. Thin streams of water slid down the glass walls of the small cafe where the man and woman sat in silence. The world outside looked gray and distant, as if time had slowed down just for them. He sat by the window, his coat damp, eyes fixed on nothing. She sat across from him, holding the small drive tightly in her hand like it was the last piece of something important. Neither spoke for a long time. The noise of the rain and the quiet hum of the coffee machine were the only sounds between them. Finally, she broke the silence. "You haven't told me what's really in this." He looked up slowly, his face tired. "You don't want to know everything." "Not yet. I already crossed that line," she said softly. "You pulled me into this, and I can't go back now." He hesitated. "What's inside that drive isn't just information. It's proof of what they've done. Not only lies, but decisions that cost lives. If it goes public, it won't just hurt the people responsible. It could tear apart everything connected to them." Her voice was calm but firm. Maybe that's what needs to happen. He studied her for a moment, trying to understand how she could still believe in something like justice after everything she'd seen. "You sound like someone who still has hope," he said. "I don't," she replied, "but I still have anger. And sometimes that's enough." He almost smiled, but his eyes stayed heavy. "Then you'll need both. Anger and hope. Because this isn't going to end clean." Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away footprints and sounds. The world looked peaceful, but inside everything felt fragile. They left the cafe just before sunrise. He walked a few steps ahead, scanning the street, his movements cautious. The woman followed, pulling her coat close. They reached a small apartment building at the edge of the city. The place looked old and forgotten. Its walls faded from years of weather and time. He unlocked a door on the second floor and gestured for her to enter. Inside it was quiet. Just a desk, a couch, and a computer setup that looked built for secrecy. She noticed the thick curtains drawn tight, the faint smell of coffee, and the stack of hard drives on the shelf. "This is where you've been hiding?" she asked. "Not hiding," he said. "Waiting." She set her bag down. "For what?" "For someone who still remembers what truth feels like." For a few moments, they both stood in silence. Then he turned on the computer, typing in a series of long passwords. The screen filled with folders and encrypted files. "This is everything," he said quietly. "I made copies just in case. But you can't open them without my code. Not yet." She looked at the folders, the endless lists of numbers and dates. "What do we do now?" He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "We find a way to tell people without getting killed in the process." She laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "That's comforting," he smiled faintly. "I didn't say it would be easy." They spent the rest of the morning talking, not just about the files, but about how it had all started. He told her about the moment he stumbled across a data trail while running diagnostics on an old government server. At first he thought it was a mistake, a leftover from some outdated system. But the deeper he looked, the clearer it became. It wasn't just corruption, he said. It was manipulation. Whole stories rewritten, reports changed, people erased, like their lives never happened. She listened quietly, her pen moving across the page. The journalist inside her had come alive again. "Why didn't you just go to the media?" she asked. He laughed bitterly. "You really think they'd publish it?" "The same networks that sit in those people's pockets. They'd silence it before it even reached the editors." "Then why me?" "Because you're the only one who still asks the right questions." The way he said it made her chest tighten. It had been years since anyone believed in her work. Before she could answer, the lights flickered. A soft clicking sound came from somewhere in the hallway. He froze. "Don't move," he whispered. She looked at him, alarmed. "What is it?" He went to the wall and pressed a small button hidden under the shelf. The screen changed, showing a live feed from a camera outside the door. Two men stood there in plain clothes, pretending to check their phones. "They found us," he said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "How?" "They always find a way." He grabbed a small bag from under the desk and stuffed the drive inside. "We need to leave, now." They slipped out the back door, down a narrow stairway that led to an alley. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold and heavy. He led her through side streets and empty parking lots until they reached a bus terminal. They didn't talk on the way. Every sound felt too loud, every step too close. When they finally boarded a bus heading out of the city, she leaned back in her seat, her hands shaking. He looked out the window, scanning the roads. His mind ran through plans and safe houses, old contacts, people who still owed him favors. But something about this felt different. Whoever was chasing them wasn't just after the files. They wanted silence. After an hour of silence, she turned to him. "You said you made copies." "Where?" He hesitated. "Somewhere they won't look." "Somewhere only I can reach. And if something happens to you?" He didn't answer right away. "Then you'll have to finish what I started." Her chest tightened again. "You talk like you've already given up." He turned to her. "I haven't. But I've seen what happens to people who try to bring the truth into the light. Some of them disappear. Some end up accused of the very things they tried to expose. It's a game you can't win. You can only survive long enough to be heard." The bus drove through winding roads, past fields and rivers until the city was just a blur behind them. By the time they reached a small town hours later, the sky had cleared. They walked to a motel on the edge of the main road. The sign flickered weakly in the wind. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and dust. The woman set her bag down and sat on the bed, exhausted. He stood by the window, checking the street below. "We'll stay here a night." "Maybe two. Then we move again." She nodded, then looked at him carefully. "You've been doing this alone for a long time, haven't you?" He smiled sadly. "Long enough to forget what trust feels like." She looked down at her hands. "You can trust me." He turned away from the window. "I want to, but I've learned that trust is what they use to find you." She didn't reply. The room fell into a quiet tension, heavy but human. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the files, about what could be inside, about the people who wanted to bury it all. Her mind replayed every headline she had ever chased, every story that got silenced. Somewhere between fear and exhaustion, she got up and stepped out into the night. The street was empty. The air smelled of rain and gasoline. She walked a few steps, trying to clear her head. That's when she saw the reflection in a window, a dark figure across the road watching. Her heart skipped. Before she could move, the man from the room appeared behind her, pulling her gently back. "Don't," he whispered. "They're here. How? Doesn't matter. We need to go now." They moved fast, slipping behind the motel into the shadows. The sound of footsteps followed. Slow, deliberate, too close. They ran toward the highway, the woman clutching the bag tightly to her chest. Cars passed by, their headlights slicing through the dark. Finally, they ducked behind a row of trucks at a gas station. He turned to her, breathing hard. "We can't keep running like this. Then what do we do?" He looked at her with quiet determination. "We fight back," she frowned. "How?" He hesitated, then said, "I know someone. A man who used to work in cyber intelligence. He helped me once. If he's still around, he can get this story out safely. No one will be able to trace it," she nodded. "Then let's find him." They hitched a ride with a trucker who didn't ask questions. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the sun slowly rising behind them. As they drove, she glanced at him. For the first time, she saw not the genius or the billionaire everyone once admired, but a man, tired, human, and burdened by the weight of what he carried. "Why did you start this?" she asked quietly. He looked out the window. "Because I believed people deserved to know the truth about the world they live in. But I didn't realize how much it would cost." She nodded. "Maybe truth always costs something." He smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure it's worth the price." The truck rolled through miles of empty road. The woman closed her eyes, clutching the bag as if it were a heartbeat. Somewhere far ahead, a faint light glowed on the horizon. Not the city, not yet, but the beginning of something new. For the first time since this began, she felt something stir inside her. Not fear, not anger, but purpose. And that purpose was stronger than the danger waiting for them. The truck rolled down the highway for hours, passing through small towns that looked half asleep under the morning sun. The road stretched endlessly ahead, quiet except for the hum of the engine. The man sat near the window, lost in thought, while the woman stared at the passing landscape, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. She could still feel the cold fear from the night before, the sound of footsteps behind them, the way they ran through the rain with their hearts pounding. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that figure standing across the street watching. Whoever those people were, they weren't giving up easily. The truck driver hummed softly to an old radio song. He didn't ask questions. That was good. Questions meant risk, and right now, silence felt safer. After a few miles, the man finally spoke. "We'll get off at the next town. It's safer to disappear in small places." The woman nodded. "And then we find your friend?" "If he's still around," he said quietly. "He used to live off the grid. Changed places often. He doesn't trust anyone anymore. Can't blame him." She studied his face for a moment. There was something in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but the look of someone who had seen too much and still carried it all. "You really believe he'll help?" she asked. "He's helped me before," he said. "He's one of the few people who understands what we're up against." When the truck pulled into a small diner on the edge of the next town, they thanked the driver and stepped out. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of coffee and wet earth. The place looked quiet, the kind of town where strangers stood out. They went inside the diner and sat in a booth near the window. A waitress with kind eyes brought them coffee. For a moment, it almost felt normal. But normal didn't last long anymore. The man pulled out a small phone, one that looked too old to matter. He typed a message carefully. "Need to meet." "It's urgent." A few minutes passed before a reply came. "You shouldn't have reached out." "Too risky," he frowned. The woman leaned closer. "Is that him?" "Yes, and that's not a good sign." He typed again, "We don't have a choice. I have the files." This time the reply took longer. When it came, it was short. "Abandoned warehouse near the station. 1 hour, come alone." He put the phone away. "We go together," he said. The woman didn't argue. She just nodded and finished her coffee, her mind racing with questions. An hour later, they reached the old warehouse. The building stood silent, surrounded by rusted fences and broken windows. It looked like time had forgotten it. Inside, dust hung in the air like fog. The man stepped forward carefully, his eyes scanning the shadows. The woman stayed close, clutching the small bag that held the drive. A faint sound came from deeper inside. Footsteps. Then a figure appeared from the dark. He was older, rough-looking, with a short beard and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't smile. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said to him. "You shouldn't have contacted me," the stranger replied. "They've been watching me for months. Now they'll watch you too." The woman glanced between them. "We don't have time for this. We need to get the truth out." The stranger looked at her, his expression hard. "Truth? You think the truth matters anymore? It's just another story they'll twist and bury. Not if we make it impossible to hide," the man said firmly. "I have proof, everything." The stranger crossed his arms. "Proof doesn't protect you. It paints a target on your back." The man stepped closer. "You owe me. You remember what happened last time? You said if I ever needed help." The stranger sighed. "I remember." He looked at the woman again. "Who is she?" "She's a journalist," the man said. "One of the few I can still trust." The stranger gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's a dangerous word now, trust." For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of dripping water echoed through the empty building. Then the stranger walked toward a metal table and set down a small laptop. "Show me what you've got," he said. The man hesitated, then handed him the drive. The stranger plugged it in, typing quickly. The files appeared line after line, filling the screen with names, dates, and codes. He scrolled through in silence, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up. "You weren't exaggerating." "No," the man said. "Now you understand why we can't go to the media. We need to release it in a way they can't block." The stranger rubbed his chin. "That's not easy. These people control everything, news, servers, even the networks you think are safe." "Then find a way," the woman said quietly. The stranger looked at her again, as if seeing something different this time. "You really believe in this, don't you?" "I believe in people," she said. "I believe they deserve to know what's real, even if it scares them." He sighed. "You remind me of how I used to think." He typed a few more commands, then closed the laptop. "I can help you, but once this starts, you can't stop it. They'll come after everyone connected to it." The man nodded. "We're already running." The stranger packed the laptop into a small bag. "There's a safe place a few miles from here. We'll set up there and start transferring the data. But after that, you're on your own." They followed him out of the warehouse, walking through the narrow streets until they reached a small house near the train tracks. Inside, the air was cool, and the walls were lined with old radio equipment and computers. It looked like a place built for secrets. The stranger began setting up his system, connecting wires, typing commands, and watching data move across the screen. As they worked, the woman sat by the window, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and gold. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. But beneath it all was the quiet dread that something was coming. She turned to the man. "Do you ever think about what happens after this? If the truth comes out?" He looked at her thoughtfully. "I try not to. It's easier that way." "But if we survive," she said softly, "what will you do?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe disappear. Somewhere quiet. No technology, no noise, just the sound of the wind." She looked at him and said, "You don't seem like the kind of person who disappears." "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm tired of fighting shadows." Before she could answer, the stranger called out, "It's starting. The data's moving." They gathered around the screen. The files were being transferred, encrypted and sent through dozens of hidden networks. It was working but slowly. Then the power flickered. Once, twice. The stranger froze. "That's not good. What's happening?" the woman asked. "They found the signal. They're trying to block it." The man stepped forward. "Can you reroute it?" "I'm trying." His fingers flew across the keyboard. "But they're fast. Faster than I expected." The room filled with the sound of warning beeps. Lines of code flashed red. "Come on," the stranger muttered. "Just a few more minutes." Outside, headlights appeared in the distance. A black car stopped near the house. The woman's heart jumped. "They're here." The man looked at the stranger. "Finish it." "I'll hold them off as long as I can," the stranger said. He opened a drawer and handed the man a small flash drive. "This has the last part of the data, everything they don't want anyone to see. Keep it safe." The man took it, his jaw tight. "Thank you." The stranger gave a small nod. "Go, both of you." "I'll cover your exit." They hesitated, but he shouted, "Go!" They ran through the back door into the dark, the sound of tires screeching behind them. Shots rang out, not loud but sharp enough to pierce the night. The woman stumbled, but he pulled her up and they kept running, their footsteps echoing against the wet ground. They didn't stop until they reached the old bridge outside town. From there, they could see smoke rising in the distance, the small house burning. The woman covered her mouth, her eyes wet. He stayed behind. The man nodded silently. He knew what it meant. They stood there, watching the flames until the smoke swallowed the stars. For a while, neither spoke. The night was cold, but the silence between them was warmer than fear. Finally, she whispered, "Do you think it worked?" He looked at the flash drive in his hand. "I don't know, but I know he gave everything to make sure it might." She reached out and touched his arm. "We can't stop now," he nodded. "We won't." They started walking again, their shadows stretching long under the moonlight. The road ahead was uncertain, but they had no choice but to keep moving. Somewhere out there, the truth was waiting to be heard, and someone had to make sure it reached the world. As they disappeared into the night, the faint glow of the fire behind them faded, but its light burned quietly in their hearts, a reminder of what they had lost, and of what they were still fighting for. And though they didn't know where the road would lead, they both understood one thing. Once you uncover the truth, there's no way back to silence, not anymore. The city looked different from the small rooftop where they stood. From up here, the chaos below seemed distant, almost unreal. The lights flickered across the streets, cars moving like tiny ants, people rushing with their invisible burdens. Up here, it was quiet. Only the wind whispered, carrying the scent of rain and metal. The man leaned against the railing, staring at the horizon. The flash drive in his pocket felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. It contained months of secrets, pieces of truth so powerful they could change the world or destroy everything they had tried to protect. Beside him, the woman wrapped her coat tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on the city below, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She remembered the nights of running, the fear in every shadow, the way the stranger had sacrificed himself to make sure they had a chance. His courage had been quiet but unwavering, and the cost of it was real. She felt it in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "We can't go back," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "No," she replied. "We can't, not now." They had come a long way, but the danger hadn't gone away. Whoever was trying to stop them was still out there, and now they had a target on their backs stronger than ever. But something had changed. For the first time in months, they weren't running blindly. They had a plan and the power to make it work. He pulled out the small laptop he had kept hidden under his coat. The screen lit up and he typed quickly, connecting to the network that the stranger had set up before his disappearance. The woman watched over his shoulder as lines of code streamed across the screen. Each line, each number, each symbol represented a story someone had tried to hide. Lies, manipulation, secrets that had been buried too long. "This is it," he said, his voice steady but soft. "Once we send this, there's no turning back." The woman's hand hovered over the keyboard. "Are we ready?" she asked. He nodded. "We have to be. People deserve to know. And if we don't do this, all of it dies with us." She took a deep breath and pressed the final key. A hum filled the air, almost like the world itself was holding its breath. The files began to distribute across secure networks, bouncing from server to server, hidden, encrypted, and impossible to erase. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but neither of them moved. The moment demanded focus, and the gravity of what they were doing pressed down on them. Minutes passed like hours. Then finally, the screen flashed. Transfer complete. They looked at each other, not smiling, but with a shared understanding, relief, fear, and something stronger, hope. "It's out," she whispered. "The truth is out," he nodded. "Now it's up to them. The world decides what to do with it." For a long moment, they just stood there, letting the wind wash over them. Neither spoke. The city hummed below, alive and oblivious, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Hours later, they moved from the rooftop to the streets below. The city was quieter now, the early morning haze settling over buildings and pavement. People walked past without noticing them, unaware that the hidden world of power and secrecy had shifted that night. They walked side by side, their footsteps echoing against the concrete. Both were exhausted, but neither dared slow down. Every corner, every shadow was a reminder that danger was still near. Finally, they reached a small, abandoned train station at the edge of the city. It was quiet, empty, and perfect for hiding. They sat on the cold benches, letting their thoughts drift. The woman spoke first. "Do you think they'll come after us?" He shrugged. "Maybe, but we did what we had to do. The risk is theirs now." She looked down at the small flash drive in her bag. "It's strange. All these files, all this truth, and yet it feels heavier than I imagined." He glanced at her. "Because it matters. Truth always carries weight, sometimes more than we can bear." She nodded, her eyes misting slightly. "And we're still alive to see it." "Barely," he said, a small humorless laugh escaping him. They stayed there for a while, letting the quiet settle around them. Then, slowly, the conversation turned to lighter things. Memories, stories from their lives before this chaos, small hopes for the future. It was the first time they allowed themselves to breathe, to feel like humans again instead of fugitives carrying the weight of the world. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the station, he turned to her. "You know, this changes everything for both of us. The way people see the world, the way they see us. We can't go back to who we were." She nodded slowly. "No, but maybe we don't need to. Maybe this is who we're meant to be now. Witnesses, messengers, whatever the world needs." He studied her face, seeing determination, fear, and courage all mingled together. "You've been strong," he said quietly. "I don't know if I could have done this without you." "You didn't have to," she replied. "We did it together." For a moment, the weight of everything hung between them. The fear, the danger, the sacrifices, all of it real and heavy. But so was the truth they had delivered, the lives they might save, the stories they had uncovered. Then, without warning, a noise broke the moment. A distant car engine, slow and deliberate. They both froze. "They're still out there," he said. She grabbed his arm. "We can't stop now." "We have to keep moving," he nodded. "I know. Let's go." They walked toward the edge of the city, the streets still quiet but filled with hidden eyes. Every step was careful, every shadow watched. But they moved with purpose now, not just fear. They carried the future with them. Hours later, they found an old cabin near a river hidden by trees and fog. It was far enough from the city to feel safe for a short time. They settled inside, starting a fire in the small hearth. For the first time, they allowed themselves to relax. The room smelled of wood smoke, and the river outside sang softly. She sat close to the fire, warming her hands. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" He stared into the flames. "I try not to, but I know one thing. Once the truth is out, people will decide what it means. And we can only hope they choose wisely," she nodded. "And if they don't?" He looked at her, eyes serious. "Then at least we tried. That's all anyone can do." They sat in silence for a while, letting the fire crackle and the river sing. Every moment of peace was fragile, yet precious. They both knew the world was waiting outside, filled with people who would judge, who would fight, who might even try to erase everything again. But inside this small cabin, they were safe, far for now. The night grew long, but neither of them slept immediately. Instead, they talked quietly about everything they had learned on this journey. They spoke of the stranger who had sacrificed himself, of the files that now existed in the open, of the faces they had seen, the fear they had felt, the courage they had discovered in themselves. "You've changed me," she said softly. "And you've changed me," he replied. "I didn't think anyone could." They shared a long look, unspoken words passing between them, gratitude, understanding, and the quiet bond forged in fire and fear. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them and they fell into a heavy, dreamless sleep. When morning came, the cabin was bathed in light. Birds called softly from the trees and the river sparkled like a ribbon of silver. The world outside seemed peaceful, but they both knew that peace was temporary. Still, there was hope. Hope that the files would make a difference. Hope that the truth would reach people who could change things. Hope that their courage had not been in vain. They packed their few belongings, ready to move again. The man looked at the river, thinking about the road ahead. "We have a long way to go," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "But we're together. That's enough to start." They stepped outside, the cold morning air filling their lungs. The journey was far from over, but the weight of fear had lessened. They had survived. They had delivered the truth, and they had discovered strength they didn't know they had. As they walked down the narrow path through the trees, The city lay behind them, distant and unaware. The river flowed steadily beside them, carrying away the echoes of the past, and in that quiet, simple moment, they understood something important. The world could be cruel, lies could be powerful, and danger could be close, but courage, hope, and truth, those were stronger. They would face the road ahead not as victims but as witnesses, not as frightened people but as messengers, because once the silence is broken and the truth finds a voice, the world cannot go back to sleep, and they would make sure it didn't.